right, welcome back to VibeCode. I'm your resident business and tech nerd, Jamie Burgess, and in today's episode 4, we're going to cover something a bit more controversial. We're shifting the conversation away from AI as a replacement for developers and towards something much more practical and realistic. We're going to be talking about AI as a teammate, specifically how developers are collaborating with AI in real workflows to improve productivity, quality, and focus. To help unpack this, I am joined by Ton, who is both an AI nerd just like me and has spent a lot of time working with teams adopting AI-augmented coding in production environments. So thanks for joining us. And Ton, if you could take a moment to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Ton Young. I started off in tech support, worked my way up to full stack dev, pivoted into security, now working on AI strategy.
Awesome. So yeah, Ton and I have a lot of conversations about AI and specifically, how we can kind of adapt and evolve all the new stuff that's coming down the pipe. And so we started talking pre-season 1 of VibeCode. And so I kind of thought this was a good moment to just circle back round the sort of fluctuating perspectives in mainstream AI news. I follow Matt Berman on YouTube. That's no surprise to anyone in the organization. It's a great channel, lots of resources. And in a recent video specifically focusing on Claude Code, there were some tweets that were highlighting some very seasoned developers and thought leaders about the notion of vibe coding holding stronger than ever before. And the discussion was kind of centered around, actually, the models have now got good enough. And I think a lot of the scaffolding and the tools and the MCPs and all these bits and pieces have caught up with the process. And some major thought leaders like Andrej Karpathy, Boris Cherny, Claude Code lead, the CEO of Shopify, just to name a few, were mentioned, acknowledging that they don't read every line of code they commit anymore. And so that kind of frames us into this next realm that we're moving into, right? Obviously, all the pros and cons of that, but I wanted to start off with, as we now move into the developer ecosystem conversation, how do we see AI as a teammate playing into this high stakes code creation environment we live in, especially now we're expected to create so much code that we're never going to be able to read all of it ourselves?
I think if you consider people who report to you or who you mentor as your teammates, that's fairly accurate. In my experience with using AI to help with my own personal projects, I find that acting as a mentor is much more accurate than saying that you're working with a teammate, because the AI is, I like this metaphor. It's a amnesiac intern, right? It's very eager, but it doesn't it's that intern that you give instructions to. They nod, yeah, I get it, and then the next day, like, what did we talk about again, right? If you think of it that way, then it's very rewarding to develop that partnership, that mentorship with the AI, so that it can actually become something that you can rely on. And in the same vein, you don't want to be a micromanager of your mentee, right? You give guidance, you let them do their thing, you put in the guardrails to make sure they don't go off the rails, and you appreciate what they come up with.
That's actually really interesting. Yeah. I wonder if we're going to see, we've both been in the tech industry for, 10 plus years. So I've certainly have seen micromanagers, macro managers, and, I've been under both. And I wonder how they're going to fare over the next few years as, a micromanager of an AI agent could be an interesting challenge or a benefit. I don't know. One of the things that I call out, and I have called out in previous episodes, is right now there's a lot of AI fear in the developer ecosystem and engineering and the likes. And I think, first of all, I don't see AI to be that scary if you get on board with it for two reasons. One, if everybody has AI, the bar raises holistically. Now, I'm a realist and also pro AI at the same time, but I'm also very aware that if you choose not to adopt AI or stay up to date with the tools, that's a challenge in and of itself. But when we look at an organization who wants to adopt AI, specifically, I've used the example of a cybersecurity expert, right? The old days would be, I'd have to put this cybersecurity documentation in front or jam it down everybody's throat. You need to follow this guideline. And everyone has to have a bit of cybersecurity knowledge to be just dangerous enough to cause a problem. Well, what if you AI-ified, I don't know if I can trademark that, but I AI-ified yourself as the cybersecurity expert, put that into like a higher plane of existence into the organization. And now people can go and grab me as an AI teammate and add my cybersecurity knowledge into their like team doing code reviews and catching things and whatever. So now I've scaled myself across the entire organization, and I'm, AI Jamie, I'm not a cybersecurity person, but like if I was, would be in all the teams by choice. People would be, I don't want to learn about cybersecurity because I don't understand it and it's scary and I haven't got the time. So how do you see that function assembling agents made up of people, and those people then scale more broadly in the business?
I think this is also a problem that has been around for a while. It's a solution that is a little bit more high level what already exists, and you're going to run into the same problems, which is centers of excellences, right? So cybersecurity, you have your cybersecurity champions that are supposedly people who you can contact at any point in time to help you look over your stuff. In reality, it doesn't ever really work that way, right? They're just kind of having the title, but in some cases, it depends on the personality of the champion themselves, right? Whether they're approachable or not. And the support of leadership in terms of pushing out the champions as an important part of the development lifecycle, right? So you're going to run into the same problems, and the solution to that is going to be about the same too, which is that you abstract it out. It's if you rely on the developers or the people in engineering to reach out to it, it's going to be hit or miss. You have to treat it like DevOps, where it's systematic, right? It is so ingrained in the process that you don't even realize it's there.
Yeah, like almost invisible. It just happens. And I was talking with Mithuna on a prior episode about the idea of like a set of code review agents that just would naturally take care of a bunch of this stuff and then tell you, oh, hey, this isn't great. That code quality is not good. And hey, I'm going to create a GitHub issue for this because it's not great, but it's okay. But I'm going to block the merge if it falls foul of some of my, my internal policies or whatever. Yeah. I love that idea. And so before we go into more of the organizational stuff, I want to quiz you a little bit more specifically on your experience. So we've already talked in previous episodes, so the viewers have already had a bunch of insight into the augmented coding like tools and the pros and cons. I want to ask you where you feel like you fit on the AI maturity model. And this is arbitrary, by the way, because there is no real maturity model. But I guess another way, this is just a really easy opportunity for you to flex with some of the cool AI stuff you've been doing. Just to talk, because I know you and I both are more of the cutting edge, and it's great to hear some of the stuff you're doing every time we talk. So share away.
I still consider myself very green and very much a beginner in figuring out how all this stuff works. I just recently moved from hobby projects to try to deliver something professionally. And it made me really appreciate how AI can really supplement the parts that I'm weakest against. I'm very big picture. I understand the importance of detail and the importance of shifting left, but sometimes it's just really hard to just write all those tests and to put in all the logging and to write all the documentation, right? All of those things that I know that are important that I don't like doing is something that I can leverage AI on. That's one thing. The other thing is I have a lot of anxiety around hitting the deploy button and then having it just like blow up in my face, right?
Yep.
Because of I knew that I should have asked that question, or I knew that I didn't really understand this thing well enough, that I shouldn't have pushed it. Whenever I have that kind of feeling that something's not right, I can just ask, right?
Or like we discussed before, or deploy it, see it, and be like, I'll just scrap it and redo it, because the throwaway bar has dropped or raised, depending which one you look at it. You know, someone was saying in the same video reference earlier that like they write 3 versions of the same app and then they're checking them all and see which one they like the look of, and then just trashing 2 branches and focusing on one. Like the speed of that is so different. So I think I fully feel the anxiety, and I've trained myself to just push through, find the thing that I want, and then go back and review. It's like, did I get it right, and do I need to improve it? There's a good balance, and I like that conversation. I think we should have with more is like, how do we balance that? As we've talked in the past about speed. What was it? A traditional engineer or developer says you should be embarrassed. If you're not embarrassed by your MVP, you're not moving fast enough, right? And then my rebuttal to that, who's somebody who sat with like 1 foot in sales and marketing and 1 foot in engineering, was like, if you're embarrassed by your MVP, then you don't understand your audience enough. And so there's like all of these. But my old leader, who's regurgitated this before, used to say like, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress, I think. Good. Yeah, that's it. And so now with AI, you can not be perfect, be quick, and then retroactively do all this sort of stuff, right?
I agree with that up to a point.
Okay.
So there's another controversial topic is, are developers engineers, right? Software engineers, right? And if you're very strict about the definition of an engineer, I would say no, right? But if you think of an engineer as someone who can deliver value in a repeatable way, then a software developer can be a software engineer, right? It just depends on how much rigor they put into their processes of delivering, which most people understand as shifting left, right? So for the example that you gave earlier of creating agents to do code review, right, of a PR, why does it have to wait till a PR?
Yeah.
Right? So one of the processes that I created for myself was a series of pressure testing, right? So I would have an idea for a feature or something like that. And then I would have one agent break it down, another agent look at what different architectures would make sense, another agent look at where the security holes could be, right? And each of those agents, there's a human in the loop, which is myself, right? So I look at, does this breakdown make sense? Is it too high level? Is it too detailed? I look at the architecture. Does this particular architecture for this feature fit in with the overarching architecture of everything else, right? Do the security concerns that are being brought up by the AI really matter, right? Because security isn't about making something foolproof. It's about delivering enough security that justifies, right, the value that or the risk that it mitigates, right? So all of those things is something that I could build into a multi-agent system, right? Where I tell it, this is my feature that I want to develop, and it just goes through every single one of those things in like a group chat type of environment, right? Where they're just kind of bouncing things back and forth. It's too expensive to really do that at scale right now, but as new chips come out and new ways of leveraging micro LLMs to do these things, it'll get really, really cheap to do that, right? And so I'm already doing that personally, but I think that that's going to be where tooling goes in the future. And like I said, it should be transparent to the developer, right? And eventually that's what's going to happen. You'll get a plan and you just kind of communicate with the multi-agent system on where things needs to be adjusted.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think that kind of leads me into my next question is like, how do you see these AI agentic teams, rather than just teammates, change the way that a single developer would start a project versus the old-fashioned way of like spec docs and BRDs and blah 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 blah. How does that start change now? Like when you spin something up, what do you do? How's it look for you?
MIT released a paper that showed no matter how many people say that they're having pilots or agents in the system, right? Only 5% of them actually make it to production and deliver value.
Yep.
And one of the key things is that the people who build the agents work in lockstep with the people who use the agents, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And so a lot of firms claim that they do agile, right? But they just kind of do waterfall a little bit faster. Right? Whereas true agile methodology has a very tight coupling between the people who use the product and the people who build the product. And I think that's going to be the difference between how things worked before and how things work now, is that you don't start as a developer from a spec document. You start from understanding the use case.
Right. Yep. That's my sort of area where I think now AI has helped me shine, is I'm sort of pre-sales nerd, right? So I'll go in and be like, hey, customer, explain your problem, and I can then translate that to technology. But now I can kind of squash that down, and rather than just hand that off in technological terms to a bunch of people, I can actually go build a prototype. So the customer's now like picking buttons, moving things, thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could add this? And so now I'm handing over something that's actually tangible, and then someone can go and focus on the security and all the like the grown-up stuff in the enterprise. But I will say something that I've been quite bullish on in previous episodes, and when building agents, I think you nailed it with this idea of being in lockstep of who's using the agent versus who's building the agent. But there's a little extra sort of nuance that I kind of want to call out, which is when we build a team of agents, or if I build a team of agents, no matter how much I try not to, I'm going to bring a bunch of bias, my own personal bias in my perspective and my role experience through into that agentic team. And so how do you think, and you've kind of already answered this, but I wanted to reiterate it, that people can kind of avoid the like one person, 100 agents or 10 agents that all have the same mentality or the same mindset? And, let's be honest, a salesperson won't create a great engineering agent, and an engineering agent won't create, an engineering person won't create a great marketing agent, because there is a certain amount of SME skills that need to come with that to avoid Dunning-Kruger effect like you've called out. So how can organizations from the beginning plan to use their SME expertise in their team agent creation?
The solution is still the same, right? Which is that you bring that diversity of thought in right in the beginning. Right? If you are planning your multi-agent system around siloed SMEs, you can't avoid that problem. It's not going to go away. You can mitigate that to a certain degree by teaching every single one of them to ask AI to identify the unknown unknowns, right? But even if you see what the unknown unknowns are, if you don't have any real understanding around what those things are, you're still kind of just putting a patch on the problem, right?
Yes. And the worry for me is that with everyone so busy doing more and with less, and AI's expectations increases, people are spinning up agents in their own little world that they do every day. And I hear this a lot across a lot of different organizations. And I really like your idea of you got to solve this holistically as an organization, not just as an AI problem. It's a organizational problem. And as we build these teams, we can't just allow people. I watched the demos at Ignite, right? And there was Agent 365 in the corner. It said like 126,000 agents. And I was like, what? How many organizations are going to have that many agents? And then I had this flashback to when we had SharePoint was created. We have 1,000 SharePoints, Teams, 1,000 Teams, Yammer, 1,000 Yammer, sites, whatever they're called. To avoid this, I think, is more of a cultural, organizational thing that people need to have those conversations. And you've been heavily involved in this conversation before I joined Valorum Reply. And so I think it would be good, just as an insight, how does one even start to think about their journey around solving this problem, even if they don't know they have the problem to begin with in their organizational sense or their pre-AI sense? Where's that even begin?
The one thing I'd like to point out before we go down that route is that number is probably understated by a factor of at least 10, because what people don't realize is as you get more advanced in your agent building, you start to realize that you can have your agents spawn their own agents.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? And if you're not careful, they're durable.
Yeah. Well, and my biggest issue with them is that people are creating them opaquely. They're not opaque to them, but they're not using good documentation to share. So Bob sitting next to Tim 2 seats down have probably created the exact same agent with a slight tweak, and they're not collaborating and they're not sharing. And so, figuring out that as an organization, as we create teams and AI teammates, I think for me is part of it. Like, how do we have this chat first?
It's an old problem with the same solution, right? Whether it's SharePoint or whether it's Power Apps, or most recently is to my memory, right? Or APIs, right? Everyone's creating their own API. There's like a bunch of APIs. No one knows what's there. There's a bunch of duplication. Every API does something a little bit differently, right? Yep. So you can't get consistent results. It's contracts, right? And it's a shared marketplace or shared repository that people can use and that leadership pushes, right? There needs to be a carrot and stick around it, right? A culture of collaboration. These are easy to say, hard to do.
Yeah, agreed.
But they are necessary.
Like, and the viewers have already heard me talk about AI Fridays, and while it seems trivial to get together once a week and have people talk about everything from, how they've assembled 3 coding agents to have a different perspective on something, to somebody who has figured out how to plan their vegetable garden based on AI, like all the layers, I think, are fantastic. And it's, by the way, one of the takeaways I've learned is I think there are 2 levels of AI utilization. There's the tech nerds, and then there's the everybody else's, and they all have different needs. But like the culture of AI extends way more deeply than just allowing time. I think the freedom of experimentation, having pre-agreed guardrails, but also like, maybe providing some budget for people to go play with some tools online and record them and share them amongst the organization, that kind of simple stuff. So we've kind of danced around this a little bit, but as we see AI augmented AI coding grow, beyond speed, what are the other main gains that you are seeing in organizations?
AI is an amplifier.
Mm-hmm.
That means it'll amplify the best in your org and the worst in your org. And so if you're prepared for that, these are opportunities. But if you're not prepared for it, they're disasters.
So what I'm hearing you say is like the agility that AI brings, you need to have as an organization to respond to the pros and cons that it ends up highlighting. So remaining nimble and agile and self-aware of self-critical, probably self-aware, so that you can then respond to those, I think is what I'm hearing. Okay, interesting. And obviously, I mean, this is the oldest tug of war since time began between how do I give my users more access and how do I keep more control, and then security are like, I want to maintain all the control, and users are like, I need more access, and so some of the guardrails that we've talked about before, and we've talked in prior episodes, and we actually have an episode entirely on oversight as well, so I'm not going to go into too much discussion around that, but being able to turn on a PG-13 guardrail for an LLM that you're deploying in an app is pretty powerful. But then it extends way deeper in terms of like policies, data retention, data sovereignty, all these kind of good things that go way beyond that. That obviously now, if you don't have to your point, just to underscore it, if you don't have that written down or decided, that gets blown up and the problem gets 20, 30 times worse. So on the guardrail stuff, let's just dip into the trust element now. Okay, not trust in terms of trust and transparency per se, but trust of the AI. I mentioned right at the beginning that a lot of thought leaders and coding leaders are now, I've made up the term coding leaders, but I think you get the idea. They are now committing code they don't read anymore. Are we going to get to a point where that's going to be the norm, or are we going to have to adjust our expectations? Like, how do you think about blindly accepting code that AI has created, and where does your trust meter sit with that?
So there's two ways I think of it, right? Compute used to be done with vacuum tubes and then punch cards, then compilers and then assemblers, right? We write human readable code now. How many of us can actually understand the ones and zeros that it eventually comes compiled down to?
Good.
Right? That's one part of it. The other part of it is, let's scale all the way up. You're a CEO of even 1,000-person company, right? You get a strategic plan in front of your face. Do you spend the hours and days and weeks and months to go through all of the little steps, all the little details that are involved in executing that strategy? No, right? You establish what you're willing to accept as the risk, you communicate them, you put down those boundaries, you ensure that there are consequences for not following them, and you ensure that the incentives that all of your employees have guide them down the same direction as your vision.
Right.
You have to think of managing AI in the same way.
Interesting. Yeah, so you're saying like incentivize, and the rest kind of happens natively with some, obviously the guardrails and the protection's got to be there, but I think my biggest concern on this is I see a lot of developer teams being, burned out in the old days. And now with AI, the expectation is that, humans miss things. Humans watching AI agents may not miss things. And I'll give you an example, right? People say Tesla full self-drive is not perfect, right? Yeah, it's not, but it's better than the average driver. So is that the bar? What's the bar now? If people are still being pushed harder and harder and harder to achieve the goal, and they're shipping, and now with AI, they're able to catch more than what a human would do on their own, reading lines and lines and lines of code, that's an acceptable bar. But if you compare it with perfection, I think it's not going to be there. Where do you see that bar shifting, or do we end up with the conversation we had a long time ago about the SDLCs? The can just gets kicked down the road, and it becomes then as a testing problem, and then it's a shipping problem, and then it's a consumers can't consume it fast enough, so it's change management problem.
I think it goes back to the analogy I made about the CEO, right? In the world of AI, which is non-deterministic, which basically means you ask it the same question 1,000 times, you're probably going to get 1,000 different answers, right? What does perfection mean in an environment like that? right? You cannot judge perfection from the perspective of a deterministic system, right, to one that is non-deterministic. But it's apples to oranges, right? The advantage of a deterministic system is that it's repeatable. The advantage of a non-deterministic system is that you get results that are sometimes really bad, but sometimes really, really good, right? That's how creativity works. So,
yeah, the normalizing of that is what yields the results that people are looking at. Interesting. Yeah, I'd not considered it that way before. In that, because the results are varied, everything we should be doing inherently is just applying common critical thinking to each step. But then, I would say, does it go back to the non-technical measures that we set up right at the beginning of the KPIs and the way that the problems are identified? Is that now the solution? So in pre-sales, it becomes even more important to capture what are you trying to do. Let's forget the technology for a second. Like, what is the person or what is the project actually objectives, and have we solved that, and how close to that are we? And then we can talk about efficiency gains and all the rest of it afterwards.
So I'm pretty sure someone else has thought of this, and maybe they've already talked about it, but I just haven't seen it. One of the things I've been gatekeeping, which I don't think really makes sense anymore, is exactly that. The old ways of determining good enough were things like user acceptance tests,
right,
which are written by engineers that are interpreting the user acceptance test criteria, which is also something that is interpreted by maybe a business analyst from the product person's interview with the customer, right? So there's like multiple times removed before it goes back to the customer. And sometimes it never actually gets back to the customer until it's, pushed to production.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That's not going to work because of the non-deterministic way that code is going to be written. The only thing that you have to be able to judge whether something is good enough is that spec document, right? The plain English someone can understand. This is what I want. These are the constraints. If it goes above this threshold or below this threshold, it can't be right. Right? Those types of distilled understanding of the use case is the user stories, the features, the task that are the source of truth now, which is needed to be committed in with the repo, not as user stories in a backlog. That is now part of the repo, and that is how you judge, as code is changing, whether or not it's still within the thresholds, whether it's still actually delivering.
So almost keeping that in the context window of the stuff you're building is the end game. And like I've seen this for KPIs as well in organizations I've worked in, where they're like, oh, I'm going to go build this thing because the thing I'm building, it makes it better, so therefore it's going to drive engagement. And then somebody else goes and builds something off that KPI, and you're like, wait, you're just that is now so far removed from the original objective that now a KPI kind of has no relevance back to it. So having that goal, I think, is really interesting. Experimentation will end up, you might get a couple of points removed and discover a bit of a diamond in the rough, maybe. But I think, it's a really good point. And actually, going back to the context size, for me, when you and I were AI coding or vibe coding early on, the biggest problem I saw with a lot of people feeding back to us was, it keeps duplicating code, or it keeps creating like the same stuff, and context was kind of the biggest problem, or least talked about problem, but it was the biggest. How can, when you're writing, enterprise code-based systems, how can you manage large context windows? We've still not seen it solved yet, but how do you think about, like, specifically you talked about spec.doc or whatever other bits that might add it to the repo. What other things do you think are super critical for teammates, AI teammates, to be able to leverage in order to handle this sort of tricky context size problem that, as projects grow enterprise grade, then you have to manage these elements and not end up writing a thing on a thing on a thing on a thing that you've lost that origin?
So as traditional code bases grew, which usually started off from someone creating a POC that was sold as production, which means that it had to be just like ramped up and, just tech debt over tech debt over tech debt, right?
That never happens. I don't know what you...
You get this monstrosity of a single code base that maybe one person who created the POC in the beginning actually understands how it all fits together, right? How do you fix that? You refactor it so that any one person can look at any part of the system and understand that part, but it's also composable enough that if you understand what all the parts are, you understand how the whole system works, right? I think it'll be very scary when the chips and the compute and the memory bandwidth has been optimized enough so that true large, very, very large context windows exist. But until that happens, it's the same solution. You have to structure your projects in a way that is composable, because if you don't, it will become very, very expensive and very, very slow and very, very error prone, because the more you stuff into the context, the less accurate and precise an AI is going to be. Right? So the way I've been doing things is, and I kind of hinted at this before, right? When I have a feature, I run it through a series of pressure tests. And one of those things is I look at the architecture of that feature and see if it fits in with the overall architecture of the entire program, right? Because when I have the AI work on a feature, I don't have it working with the context of the entire project. That's really expensive, right? It's also very slow, and you'll find that it just comes up with some really weird answers sometimes when you ask questions. But if you break your project down in a way that it only needs to know about that particular feature with those particular constraints, and the way that it knows about the rest of the system is through a series of contracts, whether they're interfaces or whether they're just spec documents on what else exists, or whether they're just packages, right, with descriptions, you gain both precision and lower cost in terms of development time, whether it's tokens or actual time. That's how I'm dealing with it right now.
Interesting. Because a lot of the stuff I've been building in prototype phase is not, and it's greenfield. So I have a bit of a cheat code, right? Which is I'm just creating like fresh stuff. When you come in and you're engaging with legacy stuff and there's some sort of need for help, this is when this is ultimately, an enterprise grade stuff or large business size stuff. My stuff consists of a database, a front end, some APIs, and maybe some stuff in Foundry, and to get the thing off on the ground, right? But your code base,
that's enterprise.
And Intra, there we go, check. But as you build bigger and bigger components, like I haven't had to modularize stuff. I've made myself familiar with being able to create GitHub wikis that I can then keep in my code base, which are quite helpful. But I think I've always built with the idea that I do just jam everything into the entire context window, and so I can quickly fill up the context window. But you look at Gemini, and you look at some of the other I can't think of it. There's that has a 1 million token context window, And there are times where I've looked at very, very large documents and thought that could be quite useful versus, using something with a 400K token context window. But the price does matter. Like, we would be talking about oversight and the cost of management. If agents are off going away, churning through hours, maybe even a day to solve a problem, that's expensive. And making sure the guardrails aren't just policy and ethics, but also cost. So thinking about that, as you again, going back to your earlier analogy of the problems that you had in the business and the organization are amplified. And if you don't have a good handle on how your prototyping set up or how your code refactoring cost management is done, then, I'm sure we'll see plenty of people who bid for work and then realize the cost ends up being significantly higher when they actually get through it. So that's a very, very good point. I like that a lot. My favorite use of AI right now for dev is documentation. I think, especially if we work in async teams, we've kind of talked around this in different areas in this conversation, but I love the fact that I can go build what the customer wants and then document it after the fact, rather than have to go and create a bunch of stuff up front that then gets handed down. What do you see as what is, first of all, your specific favorite AI, augmented coding, or at least let's say Gen AI usage in the developer world at the moment?
I would say that it is the ability for any given AI to create the document ahead of time. I would say that having AI create documentation after the fact is an anti-pattern. Because, like I said before, that documentation is your spec. So the code should be created according to the spec, right? So whatever you're expecting that documentation to look like, you should have had that beforehand, because that's what you're giving to the AI to actually build out your system.
Also, that's interesting. So I think I both agree and disagree at the same time. I think if I wanted to use, say, Fluent Design 2, or I wanted to use security best practices or whatever, but if I write a prompt that is more of a question, like I want to create an app that can do this, that can do this, that can do that, like put some bits and pieces in there as well. I don't want to apply too much rigidity to the AI's evaluation of solutions that are available. And then I'll whittle it down to a spec doc that then me and the AI have created together. Then at that point, that's like codified effectively, and I'll reference it. And then maybe I'll reach a point where I'm like, actually, I want to add this thing, and the question could be add this, but the knock-on effect might be that I need to change the spec slightly to solve that. That, I think, is the imperfect solution. But creating that spec doc from a conversation with AI, with one or more AI agents being in my team, I think it won't be fully formed. But once it is fully formed, then it should be your reference point back all the time, so that you're not, creating multiple versions or ignoring that. So that's why I think I both agree and disagree. I think in the first instance, if I'm in plan mode, shall we say, that's a little bit different to then build mode. I'd probably say that's a good line of delineation, right?
That's actually my current process. Is I take a feature, I work with AI to break it down, I pressure test it, and then I hand it off to get it created. I test the results and I find out, I missed this, or I didn't consider this. Yeah. What I tell it to do is that I tell it that this is what I noticed. How does the spec need to be updated to account for this? And then I rebuild it.
Right.
So in a way, what you're saying is absolutely correct, in that the spec that you create in the beginning is not set in stone, right? It is a living document that gets updated as you write stuff. All I'm trying to say is that you start off with that spec document. You don't create the spec document after you've already gone through a bunch of coding.
Right. Yes. And even in rapid prototyping, I think there's the spec doc might be slightly lighter in certain, because part of what I'm realizing now is I can go back to a client within a day after making, and a lot of people are visual. They like to see the thing in front of them, and then it helps them experience, oh, if I click here and I click there, maybe if we change that flow, we did this. So in my land, like a very early stage prototyping, that spec doc is quite squishy and malleable. And I think then what I think we're in agreement is when we hand that spec off to the people who go build this thing for real, then it should be a lot more codified and sort of cemented in place. But knowing that it will update as you reach decision points of, phase 2, phase 3, whatever it may be as time goes on. All right, so we're approaching times. I've got one more question I'm going to squeeze in. What mistakes do you see when teams try and treat AI as more of a automation or a linear kind of smart branching automation rather than a full AI teammate?
This is what people call brain rot. When you treat AI that way, most of my prompts are usually, this is what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Ask me questions. What are my options?
Right.
I always get more than one answer. I always have to think through all the different perspectives because the answer is going to force me into that type of thinking, right? So you cannot get complete automation if you approach AI that way.
Right.
Right. And that's the concern that I have is people approaching AI without that understanding, because part of it is search engines, right? People our age, we're used to just putting in keywords, and that's how we get the responses back from our search engine, right? Whereas you can have a conversation, a Socratic one. I have Socratic conversations with AI to develop my understanding of any particular topic all the time to prevent that Dunning-Kruger bias type of thing, right? To just kind of have a holistic understanding. If you start off like that, whenever you start off any project, you're not going to have a lot of the problems that people are talking about. But if you just go in saying, I want this, give me the answer, it's very hard not to just implement it.
Yeah, that is so. Just to take a little step back, in part of the AI maturity model that we at Valorum Replied GT will be looking at is it's more of an assistant, like ask a question, get an answer. You just, it's a kind of linear approach. Whereas, as you said, like asking AI to find better ways to do something, giving it some more freedom to use the vast knowledge it has versus the knowledge that I have, I think is a much greater approach, a much better approach to solving a lot of this stuff. I would agree. I think that's hugely important. And like, as we think about leveraging these teammates or just leveraging agents in general, one of the things I've tried to do is not just bias in terms of SME skill set, but also I don't say build me a React native app. I'd be like, I want to build an app that solves this, or I want to build an experience or a solution that does this. What are my options? And I think that kind of touches on this idea of just VibeCode V1 and this augmented AI coding, which is AI can still do this, it can still write all the code, but what I'm doing is because writing code is now infinitely faster, I'm spending much more time being thoughtful about what, how, and why I'm creating this stuff. It's like my dad always used to say, measure twice, cut once. It's kind of the same vibe, isn't it? You're thinking more about it up front. And there is still I don't have to like you said, don't build a perfect solution up front, but build it enough that it's thoughtful enough, that it's broad enough, that it's got good understanding of the problem. But because it's so easy to create code, you can kind of just be like that in like that, and start again and add this extra bit of context to it. So I think that's super key. But I know we're at time, so I think one last thing, if you had to summarize the mindset shift in an organization to think about all the problems we've discussed and navigate as easy as possible this transition, what would you say the biggest mind shift is for an organization to consider?
Get help.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, yeah, not everyone's going to have the amount of knowledge and experience that we have, and people that have had more experience than us. Yeah, know when to get help. So I tell my kids that all the time. The most powerful thing is asking for help. It's very valid.
And it's not just me doing a shameless plug for Valorum. If you read through the research, any of the research that's being published recently, successful pilots are usually between a builder and a consumer, right? Even if you want to develop internally the expertise to be able to build things, you need to at least get help in the beginning to get that started, right? Trying to develop that in-house goes back to the AI amplifying your strengths and weaknesses, right? If you already are an engineering powerhouse that has not just smart people, but people who know how to work well with each other, people who are adaptable, people who are used to failing and learning and iterating rapidly, you probably don't need help, but that's very few and far in between, right? Most companies, in my opinion, should be seeking help on how to get started, because you sidestep all of the organizational problems that you have by bringing in someone from the outside. Because that's where it's painful, right? The politics and the existing organizational issues that you have, that's what's going to kill you.
What to allow people to use, what not to use, whether to, totally. I think and so one of the things that I've been talking around a lot with other Valorum Apply folks is it's very easy for someone to go, I want an agent. I mean, the oldest thing, can I have one AI, please? And like, all right, so now I want one agent. Okay, what does your agent do? I don't know, maybe an agent. And so that's just the wrong mentality to think about, like discovery, understanding. You and I will discuss this in depth, but the idea of you don't just build the agent, you build the kitchen so that people can cook and make their own agents that are relevant to solve their business problems across the board, and then you become a more resilient AI native or a frontier firm, as Microsoft calls it. So look, with that, I think it's time to wrap. Thank you, Tom, for your super thoughtful perspective. Love this. I could chat to you all day about AI and the experience that you've gathered. And it's great seeing AI as a teammate rather than a replacement, and how those changes work, how you build trust with those AI teammates, and how they deliver quality as software at scale. And of course, thanks to everyone watching. In our next episode, we'll be exploring what it takes to guide and govern AI responsibly as it becomes more deeply embedded across the enterprise. So we'll hope you join us in the next one. Thanks so much.